But we want to begin with the issues that are top of mind for most Americans: inflation and the economy. They may be at the top of their priority list for the new administration, but we are seeing a disconnect. When asked what they think the administration is prioritizing, Americans see inflation and the economy taking a backseat to the border, the federal workforce, tariffs, and more. In fact, according to our CBS News poll, although people do approve of him on some of those other issues, there is a 50-point gap between people who say the president should make inflation a priority and those who say he is. We want to welcome to the program Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Good morning to you, Mr. Treasury Secretary.
Morning, Margaret.
So let's dig in on this, because it seems there's a bit of a perception gap there. Our polling also shows at least half the country reports concern about paying for food and groceries and housing. They continue to call the economy bad, even more so than last month. And 49% told us the economy is getting worse. When can Americans expect to experience the benefits that President Trump said would be coming in day one?
Yeah, well, Margaret, what I find interesting is for the past year and a half and during the campaign, most of the media said, oh, the economy is great. It's just a vibe session. Now that President Trump's in office, there's an economic problem. And I'll tell you what the problem was.
We were pretty straightforward on this program, sir.
Well, I haven't seen this program, but in general, this idea that working class Americans didn't know what they were talking about. They didn't know their lived experience. They didn't know what their pocketbooks were feeling. And I'll tell you, President Trump was elected. One of the reasons was the affordability crisis, and we were setting about doing that. So after 4 years of disastrous policies, we're running these gigantic deficits that led to the affordability problem, massive government regulation. So what we had was a demand shock from the government spending that was met by supply constraints with overregulation. Mm-hmm. So we are in the process of deregulating, which will free the supply side, and we are cutting back the government spending. It took 4 years to get us here. President Trump's been in office 5 weeks, and I can tell you we're working every day. Mm-hmm. What I will point out, interest rates, the 10-year bond, which I am focused on, have been down every week since President Trump was president. Mortgage rates have been down every week. So that's a pretty good start. Mm-hmm.
I hear you that sometimes the data lags reality, but when we are talking about people's perceptions of the economy, it's just how they're feeling right now. We see in our polling 52% of Americans say Trump's policies are making grocery prices go up. They explicitly said that on this bar chart you see there. So it's an experience and a perception issue. When does that shift? When do we see the benefits of the planning you say is underway?
Look, I think President Trump said that he'll own the economy in 6 or 12 months, but I can tell you that we are working to get these prices down every day, but it took 4 years to get us here, and we've had 5 weeks. So interest rates are down. That's a very good start toward housing affordability, toward auto affordability. Mm-hmm. And we are tackling this. At Treasury, we are going to appoint an affordability czar. We are going to have an affordability council. We are laser focused on this.
What does that mean? What's an affordability czar?
Someone who picks the 5 or 8 areas where this administration can make a big difference for working class Americans.
Okay. Well, one of the things that we hear the president talk about a lot is the plan to use tariffs. I know this falls under the purview of Commerce and the trade rep, but you have spoken a bit about it before. If the president does roll out the 10% tariffs that he says are coming on China this week, the 25% on Canada and Mexico, how much do you think they will impact what Americans experience? The Peterson Institute says it'll cost households an additional $1,200 a year.
Look, a couple of things. I respect my friends at the Peterson Institute. I think they're a bit alarmist. I think a lot of their supporters are anti-tariff, so they take an anti-tariff position. And look, we have the experience of President Trump's first term, where the tariffs did not affect prices, and it's a holistic approach that there will be tariffs, there will be cuts in regulation, there will be cheaper energy. So I would expect that very quickly we will be down to the Fed's 2% target. So I'm expecting inflation to continue dropping over the year.
So should we expect these tariffs to come March 4th?
Well, there's a series of tariffs. There's March 4th, and then there are there's the big tariff program that's going to be outlined on April 2nd by Commerce and USTR, and that's the president's notion of reciprocal tariffs, and that's going to be very path dependent. We are going to show what are other countries' tariffs on specific goods, what are non-tariff barriers, what are the currency manipulation, what is manipulation of financing or labor manipulation, and what are these horrendous fines that the European Union's putting on our tech companies. And we are going to evaluate that and give them an opportunity to remedy that. So we could either see a ratcheting up in tariffs, or if our trading partners want to remedy what has been unfair trade, then we could see the tariffs come off. So it's going to be path dependent.
And that's Europe in April, mainly?
Well, that's across the world.
Okay. So when you say that Peterson institutes too alarmist with $1,200 a year on the average household, what's the cost of the household? You think it's zero?
Well, we don't know yet because it's path dependent. But what I can tell you is that I'm not worried about China. China will pay for the China tariffs because their business model is exporting their way out of this deflation. They are the most unbalanced economy in modern times. And the idea that because of a tariff, that they would lower their production is wrong. They are going to continue flooding the market. They will eat this price decrease. They will eat any tariffs that go on.
So I saw you say on Bloomberg recently that Mexico has offered to match the U.S. tariffs on China, and that you would like for the Canadians to do so as well. You described it as a fortress in North America. Is that in the works?
I don't know yet. We'll see. The Mexican leadership has offered to do that. We haven't heard from the Canadians, but I think that'd be a very good start because
by Tuesday, potentially, to offset the potential punishment on them?
By Tuesday, or maybe the tariff wall goes up, and then we see what happens from there. But I can tell you that under the cover of COVID, China dramatically increased their export capacity, and they are trying to export their way to prosperity. They are in an economic crisis. They have gigantic deflation, and it's unacceptable for them to export that to the rest of the world. And I think North America would be a very good start for pushing back against this unfair trade policy.
Well, that would be a significant development.
Very significant.
Which would avoid tariffs that are supposed to go out on Tuesday.
We'll see.
Okay. We'll be watching that space. I want to ask you about Ukraine. You were in that Oval Office meeting that went sideways on Friday. President Zelenskyy was told to leave the White House before he signed the minerals agreement that I know you have been working on. He said yesterday, though, he is ready to sign it. He called it the first step towards security guarantees. It's not enough. We need more than just that. A ceasefire without security guarantees is dangerous for Ukraine. Is the deal still on the table, or has President Trump instructed you to drop the project?
Margaret, it is impossible to have an economic deal without a peace deal. The sine qua non for an economic deal is that Ukrainian leadership wants a peace deal.
I thought this was a building block towards getting to a peace deal.
Well, it was supposed to be, but President Zelenskyy came into the Oval on Friday. There were three things that were going to be done. There was going to be a press conference, there was going to be a private lunch with 16 of us, and as you could see from Dan Scavino's the post on his X account, we were already set up to sign the deal. So it's unclear now. President Zelenskyy has thrown off the sequencing. And Margaret, let me tell you the most tragic part of this. The President Trump's idea for this economic arrangement was to further intertwine the American people and the Ukrainian people and show no daylight, to show the Russian leadership that there was no daylight. And President Zelenskyy came into the Oval Office and tried to relitigate in front of the world the deal. And the place to have done it would have been in the private lunch.
Okay, well, it's news to me that this was, that the sequencing is shifting, that you were saying you have to agree to a peace deal before the minerals agreement? There aren't even negotiations for a peace deal underway.
Well, first of all, it's not a minerals agreement, it's a general economic agreement. So calling it a minerals agreement is incorrect. And I think we have to see if President Zelenskyy wants to proceed. What's the use in having an economic agreement that's going to be rendered moot if he wants the fighting to continue? President Trump wants a peace deal.
Mm-hmm. Vladimir Putin, it's unclear if he wants a peace deal, though. There are no negotiations underway. The Secretary of State said that on another network this morning.
Yeah, and President Trump has said that. President Trump is trying to move toward peace. He said repeatedly during that episode in the Oval, we don't know if we'll get a peace deal, but we got to try.
Okay. Last Sunday, President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, said on another network that the plan for negotiations was the so-called draft Istanbul Protocol. The Institute for the Study of War says that this would leave Ukraine helpless in the face of future Russian threats or aggression. If that's described as the future of U.S. diplomacy and the framework, why isn't Mr. Zelenskyy asking the right question when he says, how can I agree to a ceasefire with no security guarantees, or even a minerals agreement or investment agreement without security guarantees?
Well, look, I think the plan is for the European Union to provide this security, not NATO, the European Union. And again, the tragedy of Friday, and I don't know what President Zelenskyy was thinking. We had President of France, Emmanuel Macron, in on Monday. Great meeting. We had Prime Minister Keir Starmer on Thursday. Fantastic meeting. They were all on board the arc of the peace agreement. All President Zelenskyy had to do was come in and sign this economic agreement, and again, show no daylight between Ukrainian people and the American people, and he chose to blow that up.
So the deal's no longer on the table, just to be abundantly clear.
Not at present.
Treasury Secretary Bessent, thank you for coming in today.
Good. Thank you, Margaret.